go back in time. And there were
when
there were less cars on the road, less travel.
Exactly.
People
had
were
longer hair.
People were less sophisticated.
Exactly.
Had more sort of
traveled around.
Were less progressive towards women, for example.
Yeah.
So it's great for you to go back to that time. Well, before we move on, let's talk to Mark Vernon, our philosopher, who all of you will know. If you haven't come to one of these before, my name's Tom. I'm the editor of The Idler. And today we've got Mark Vernon, as Vic said, who's our resident philosopher, among many other things. And my brother Will, who's got the cover story in the current Idler, which is a brilliant piece about his own experience of coronavirus. So we're going to come back to that. But on the subject of lockdown, Mark Vernon, it's been a weird week, hasn't it? Has it not? Because, you know, we keep reading different things in the papers. The big surprise was everyone actually, not everyone, but, you know, a lot of people quite enjoyed the enforced sabbatical of lockdown. My mum, who is out there somewhere, Will's mum and my mum, has not enjoyed it. I mean, she thinks it's just like living in hell. But a lot of people have enjoyed the sabbatical, but that's changed a little this week, I think. What have you been reading and what are your kind of philosophical reflections?
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's been a team at UCL led by Daisy Fancourt, and they've been tracking actually tens of thousands of people, how the lockdown is affecting them. And what seems to be the real trouble is actually change. So they noticed that when there was rumor of lockdown, people got anxious. But then the kind of lockdown period began, and people actually began to find that, you know, the whole FOMO phenomenon arose, that the fear of missing out actually was a huge relief to loads of people. So, and in fact, I think they wonder if it's even a majority of people, notwithstanding that obviously, you know, for many people it has been very trying and troubling in other ways. But now that the idea is well in circulation, the lockdown is going to come towards an end, this is actually causing a rise in anxiety once more, they've been tracking. And my thought on it was that, you know, if the lockdown has kind of shown up aspects of life for you because things have been taken away that normally just distract or cause you anxiety, you know, the hubbub of every day and so on, or the stress of going to work, whatever it might be. If you have had that experience of something else showing up in life, you know, this week coming, it seems like it's going to be the week to really remember that. And as someone put it, convert your FOMO into JOMO, you know, so the joy of missing out. So the idea is that, you know, if you have, I don't know, enjoyed the birds song, then really remember that and kind of lock it into your life going forwards. Because in some ways, you know, this strange couple of months, it may not happen quite like this again. It's probably going to drag on in drips and dregs, isn't it, over the next sort of 2 or 3 months. But to try and get something out of it, you have to really remember it, I think. And this week might be the real week to try and do that, to take notice of how you've actually discovered something new and whether you want to carry that on.
I've been enjoying it a lot because it just gives me an excuse to drink absolutely limitless crates of real ale without sort of feeling worried about it too much.
We're supposed to discover new things through the lockdown. I'm trying to be creative about it, Tom.
Oh, I see. Sorry, yeah.
You do that anyway.
Yeah, I do that anyway. Yeah, I know. Well, but I mean, I'm drinking even more now. I know it's hard to believe. And Will, at the age of 50, started taking drugs. I mean, it's pretty weird.
All right, let's skip over that.
So, Mark, would you like to conclude before? Let's go on to Will, because I think we're about that time already. And Mark, we'll come back at about 6:30 with some more philosophy. So, Will, well, first of all, thanks for this piece. I mean, it's absolutely superb. If anyone's read it online or in the magazine, Will wrote a piece about getting coronavirus and his reactions to it. And your main idea really was don't panic, wasn't it? Because it's sort of panic and anxiety would make the symptoms a lot worse.
Exactly. And the big problem, as I see it, okay, there's going to be some people for whom it's really serious. But for most of us, it doesn't getting it doesn't have to be really serious if you don't panic. The problem being that everyone is telling you to panic. Every single newspaper story is about how many people have died. Every single story is about, you know, and then of course the impact of the whole thing of, you know, obviously we're all worried about our jobs and all the rest of it. The real advice I can give, and I'm speaking to someone who had it quite badly, but it wasn't life-threatening. There was one scary night when I found it very difficult to breathe. And the thing that really, really got me through it was just calm, just breathing carefully, a lot of hot ginger and lemon, good food. I'm vegetarian, and my wife made me chicken soup. So I ate meat for the first time in 25 years. And, you know, because everyone knows how good chicken soup is when you've got flu. And this is not like flu, but there are certain similarities in terms of being completely wiped out, and that helped. And the main thing, the absolute key is, if you get it, do as little as possible. You won't want to do anything. You know, you get out of bed to go and clean your teeth when you're in the thick of it, and you just have to go and lie down again. It's so tiring. I remember getting calls from my dad, and he'd start talking about all his theories about coronavirus and stuff. And I just have to say, Nev, as we call him, I just can't talk to you because it's actually exhausting me just to hear your voice. And that's not so much a reflection. Well, maybe if it wasn't Nev and it was somebody else, I would have been all right. But it was.
Yeah, I was going to say that doesn't sound too different from normal.
No, exactly. But the main thing is that if you panic, okay, it's a respiratory condition. If you panic, and I had a coughing fit, and that was the scariest bit. But you know, if you start, your body goes into a kind of panic when you cough anyway. And NJ, my wife, had it too, and the kids had it not so bad, but we've all been through it. And you really, really do need to stay calm. And I think that for most of us, there are people who are asthmatic, who is going to be really serious. People who've got, reduced immune systems, it's going to be serious. But for most of us, my advice is, whatever you do, don't go to hospital. That's an absolute last resort. Stay calm. Sort of give in to it. Sink into it. Don't try and do things. Just let it wash over you almost. When you're really ill, it's a bit of an altered state anyway. And you feel a bit like that. You feel so exhausted and so ill. It's kind of like, just let it go. The other thing I made the mistake, when the fever was really bad, I made the mistake of, you feel so cold, so you have a hot bath. Not a good idea. A warm bath, yes, but a really hot bath means that your body is struggling to cope with the difference in temperature, and that made me feel worse. So yeah, the main thing is, well, just stay in bed. That's my biggest advice.
Do nothing is your advice, really, which is a sort of positive idling message. Now, tell me, Will, who's at home with you in your household?
My wife, Otter, my son, Pearl, our daughter, and our cat, Theo.
How old is Theo?
Theo, the cat, or the children?
Yeah.
Theo is about 12, I think.
How's he enjoying lockdown?
It hasn't really affected him too much. He seems to be whining slightly more, but apart from that, I think and maybe the foxes are getting a bit too confident. Yeah. Because they've got the run of the place outside. But apart from that, he's kind of okay.
Your son Otto is a very talented artist, and in fact, he did the illustrations for your short book about the windmill music venue. But I think he spends a lot of time in his shed, doesn't he? You built him a shed in the garden where he can go and be on his own.
That's just happened. He moved in a couple of days ago. So it's only just happened. So that's been really good. But yeah, actually, this is Roof Dog. I don't know if you can see that. That's one of Otto's drawings. And this is just a little book. It was it's on a tiny venue in Brixton called the Windmill, it wasn't so much that I wanted to do a book on a venue. It fascinated me. This was a pub that it's a former Irish council estate pub with a flat roof. It's got a Rottweiler on the roof, hence the name Roof Dog. It looks like one of those bombs that leave buildings standing but kill everyone. Is it a neutron bomb? It kind of looks like a neutron bomb hit the area and somehow it survived. That's the general vibe. And yet this has become the most important breeding ground for new music in Britain. It's all these really, really interesting bands have come out of it. Some of the recent ones is a band called Black Midi, Kate Tempest, a lot of people will know, a band called Shame, a band called the Fat White Family. They all sort of came out of this. I thought, what was going on? But the thing was, as you said, I'm a 50-year-old man. my son Otto, then 17 when I started doing this, he was going there every night. So it kind of made sense to do this father and son project where he was doing the drawings and I wrote about it.
What
So, yeah, it was fun.
And Otto and Pearl, do they like the fact that you look like a sort of glam rock star from about 1972?
Well, that's very nice of you to say that, Tom. I don't know how much they like it. They haven't complained too much. I think occasionally they have expressed concern when they were younger and I picked them up at the school gates. They occasionally got a little upset, but on the whole, they've been fine.
You didn't take your guitar with you when you picked them up from school and start playing your songs outside, like sit on a kind of grassy turf while you're waiting for them and play Get It On or anything like that?
No, that would be more if I was like mid-60s and I was trying to emulate Donovan.
How old actually are you? Because I mean, you look incredibly young.
That's very nice of you. I'm 25.
65?
20.
No, how old are you really? You must be about 51.
You know how old I am, Tom? I'm 2 years younger than you. So I'm 50.
I know, but I forget whether I'm 52 or 51 or 53 or...
I know, though, that does happen as you get older.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, I turned 50 this year. I didn't like the idea of turning 50 at all. I thought it was horrible. But then once it happened, funnily enough, I didn't really care. It was the idea of it. You know what? It reminds me exactly what Mark Vernon just said. It's the idea of lockdown. I was so depressed about it. I got so upset. When it happened, and initially I thought, well, I'm going to lose my job over this because I spend so much of my life going to gigs, reviewing them and traveling to do interviews and everything. But then I started finding a way around. You know, the newspaper found things that I could do from home, interviews I could do on the phone and so on. And I wouldn't say I enjoy it. I'm very much looking forward to it being over. But at the same time, there definitely have been advantages. The slow life, the spending more time with your family, listening to the little birdies, doing a bit of gardening. You know, the smaller life has been nice.
Well, like you said, it's a bit like going back to 1972, which is your ideal year. But in 1972, you were only 2 years old. But we did grow up in the 70s and 80s.
That's correct.
We had young parents who sort of more or less ignored us, and we had loads of au pair girls, and our parents were more interested in their work really than in us. We were left to our own devices.
That was the good old. That was when it was good.
Sorry?
That was the good times when they ignored us. Yeah, that was the best period.
Before Ned went weird.
It's when they started paying attention, it all went wrong.
But yeah, I'm just remembering, you know, like this system is called Zoom. But Zoom to me was a sort of a quite an exciting iced lolly that we used to go and get from the sweet shop on our own. Do you remember Zoom? What other iced lollies do you remember from that period? Your favourite ones from the late 70s, early 80s?
Haunted House. That was fantastic. Yeah, and I'd like them to bring back Texan bars, actually. I don't know if you remember A Man's Got a Chew, What a Man's Got a Chew. I was very fond of them too.
Remember Lolly Gobble Choc Bomb?
Yeah, they had chocolate in the middle. They were like a fab, but with a fake chocolate imitation brown thing in the middle. I loved them. Yeah, it tasted of nothing as well because it got so cold.
With hundreds of thousands.
That's right. Excellent.
Now, do you remember when our dad went weird? Our dad, for everyone who doesn't know, Will's written a really funny book about this, actually, called The House is Full of Yogis. One minute we had this kind of quite groovy 70s dad. They had a Morgan, loads of friends round. They get pissed. There's overflowing ashtrays, wine bottles. Will and I would come downstairs in the morning and there'd be like broken windows, men asleep under tables, Chianti bottles and rubbish everywhere from a party. And this was fine. This was quite fun. And one day, we had a pinball machine. Never used to drive down to Brighton on some Saturdays or Sundays, and we'd go and play pinball, and you know, he'd throw fireworks in the bonfire and things like this. And then suddenly he changed. He came home. He said he'd found God, and he started wearing a sort of dhoti. He turned into some kind of version of, like a sort of suburban white version of Mahatma Gandhi. And Will and I would come home from school and found that the whole front room was full of Indian ladies in white saris meditating and talking about the 5,000-year cycle. I didn't mind this particularly. I thought it was quite funny, and I was listening to the Doors and smoking weed and meditating, and it also mixed in together. But I think you have that bit, just that bit younger and you were a bit more freaked out, weren't you? Can you remember what it was like?
Yeah, this would happen when I was about 11 or 12, and I really didn't like it. I mean, I remember one time I was really into BMXing, and I used to absolutely love it. And our dad was a really good dad. He was quite young and fun. He's the kind of fun dad. So I'd achieved this great goal, which was jumping over a stream, which I've been trying to pluck up the courage to do for months and months and months. I finally did it, and I was so excited. I came back home. And I cycled home really, really quickly and burst through the door. And I said, "Nev, you never guess what's happened." And he said, "Not right now, Sturch," as he used to, still calls me. "I've got some people I'd really like you to meet." And we take it. And I was like, "Can I tell you about the street?" And I just want to. And then there were like a bunch of kids, and they chased after it. And he went, "Yes, yes, okay, not right now." And he took us into the living room, which was still a very nicely well-appointed middle-class living room.
Yeah.
And there were sort of 30 meditating people in kind of all dressed in white. And I remember, from then on, I'd come back home after school, and there'd be some sort of, a sort of pale, kind of reedy-looking man who'd be staring at a flower in our garden, and I wouldn't know who he was. There's a lot of this going on.
There was, yeah. And he sort of, basically what you're saying is he kind of lost interest in us.
He didn't. He wanted us to go with him, basically. He wanted us to go clear with him into the world of the Brahma Kumaris. When I got older, now I like the Brahma Kumaris. There's lots of things I like about them. I like that. I think they've got a good, peaceful message. They've got a lot of good lessons on how to live, in a more thoughtful way. But at the time, I think what happened was also the Brahma Kumaris in Britain were very young. And when you have a young religion, it tends to be quite cultish because it's almost like it's got to make an impact to survive. And Daddy Yankee, the leader, was this terrifying figure who was about 5'0", looked a bit like Yoda from Star Wars, and just came out with these incredibly wise sayings while kind of staring at you because you had to do open-eyed meditation. And it was absolutely terrifying. I mean, I'll just say quickly, the absolute worst, which really was bad. It was not long after Nev discovered the Yogis. We had to go to this house in Willesden. It just looked like a sort of front room, really. And in the middle of it, there was a meditation, all the usual stuff, leave your shoes by the door and all the rest of it. And then Daddy Yankee, through a translator, said, "Would anyone who is pure please stand up?" And suddenly Nev looked at me and I realized, she means virgins. and I was 12. I can guarantee you I was a virgin and continued to be for quite a long time. But anyway, it was absolutely awful. And then it was really, really bad as well, because one guy got up and he was not younger than 40. And I felt sorry for the poor guy. And I was like, do I really have to? I couldn't move. I was frozen to the spot. So that was probably, that was a moment of phenomenal embarrassment.
Now, Will, let's talk about music. When you were young, I remember you being really into music. We both were, but you probably got even more into music. You got into music really at the beginning, basically thanks to me. Like, it was I had the Cramps records, you stole them, you put them at the front of you were more of an ELO fan, I seem to remember. Anyway,
here we go.
I got you into cool music. But anyway, and...
What happened? Where did it go, Tom? Where did the call go?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, it all went wrong somewhere. I think it's a bit undignified to try and be cool when you're like over 50, but
Well, that's definitely something you've achieved then.
So, well,
anyway,
you did a brilliant fanzine called. What I'm trying to say is that your career is you're still doing now the things that you were doing, voluntarily. When you were at school, and you produced this absolutely fantastic fanzine called Make It in Ongar. And there's an interview in it with Bobby Gillespie, which makes a good read now. I think it's on Twitter. So do you see a sort of continuation of your own interests? I mean, it's quite amazing to have been able to carve out a job and a career, doing the things that you like doing. Was it sort of part of the plan? Did it happen by mistake? You were a publishing company, and then the Guardian, and now the Times. Can you tell us a little bit about how that all happened?
Yeah, sure. It wasn't a plan. what happened is that I did the fanzine when I was a kid. I was still at school, and that was a case of going up to these then not very well known bands like My Bloody Valentine and Primal Scream and saying, "Can I interview you?" And I had no idea what I was doing, but they said yes, and I put that out. I mean, that was a bit of fun when I was 17. Left school, went to university, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I certainly had lofty ambitions of being a novelist, and I still do, but I've never got it right. You know what I mean? I've never got that formula right, or it's never been good enough. So I think I was working at a publishing company called Dorling Kindersley, but I mean, this was starting in the mailroom, and then working on reception, doing all kinds of stuff. Just I was needing to survive. Later became an editor, but it was very, very badly paid. I was doing encyclopedias. I mean, this really badly paid. I mean, like £11,000 a year kind of stuff. Couldn't really afford to live. And I was unhappy doing it. I was frustrated. I didn't really like the office life, and left and went to India for a while. Lived very, very cheaply for about 4 months, and then NJ, my now wife, came out, and we travelled about. When I came back, I thought, I want to work, but I don't want to have a job. And I was doing all kinds of things, driving a van, bits and pieces. And then I got a little bit of work from a friend of yours, Tom, called Amelia, who said that there's a bit of work.
I'm just remembering that actually your success is all thanks to me. I'd forgotten that, but thanks for reminding me. Yeah.
Yeah. Without a doubt. So I was doing a little bit of subbing work at Guardian Guide. This is when in my kind of 26, 27. And from there, I just started doing bits and pieces of journalism. There was some stuff at Time Out. I was always really, really into music. I never stopped being into music. Always into buying records. I was into the whole culture of it, though. I really, obviously love the 60s and 70s, but modern music too. I like the stories. I like the people involved. I like the color around it just as much as I like the music. I was really, one of those people that really enjoyed reading music books and The Enemy and all the rest of it. And so I was just pitching pieces to the Guardian, and then slowly you build up a name. It was more general initially. I've only been I've been the rock and pop critic for the Times for 10 years now.
10 years.
10 years, yeah. And so that's been the period when I've been doing it solidly.
Yeah, and tell us about those 10 years, and also before that, because you've interviewed loads of bands for The Guardian. Who have been the biggest sort of arseholes that you've interviewed, and who have been the nicest ones, do you think? I mean, someone's just asked down the side, when you meet your heroes, is it disappointing? These are people that we all grew up with. I mean, what if you've met the Cramps? But for an example is, the Cramps album, Songs the Lord Taught Us.
Amazing.
Someone it the other day. It's 40 years ago it came out. And I used to remember staring at it, for hours, like analysing every detail, and then and that'd be the same with all your, with all our sort of musical heroes. And some of them you've met. You've been in a private jet with Pete Townsend. You've been to Paisley Park. You waited 3 days for an interview with the turbaned one, didn't you? And it'd be fascinating to get a little insight into, which ones have been most sympathetic, which ones have been most difficult, and so on.
Sure. Lou Reed. I asked a question to Lou Reed, and I thought it's a very thoughtful question about the Velvet Underground, very detailed. Obviously, I absolutely loved them, so I was very nervous. He stared at me for a long time. Then he took his glasses off, because obviously he did his interview with sunglasses on, and his eyes looked like kind of rusty nails. And he said, "That's a rather pubescent question, don't you think?" And then he invited his backing band to come and laugh at me. So he said, hey, come on, listen to what this guy's just said. And they all had to stand around and see what a complete idiot I was.
Really?
But the thing is, yeah, but with Lou Reed, you kind of want him to throw you down the stairs. You don't want him to be a nice person.
No, well, it makes a better story. I mean, when bad things are happening, you must surely be thinking, this is not great now, but it's going to be great to write about.
Well, I thought to think about that after the interviews happened, really, because at the time you're worried about making sure that you've got an interview. you know, they're not going to walk out or something like that, you know. So I'm all, when it's difficult, I'm always very nervous. But then there are people like, so Pete Townsend is a genius, really generous, a really, really nice person, incredibly thoughtful. You know, you meet someone like him and it's just an absolute dream. Keith Richards was fantastic, incredibly charming. He goes into Keith Richards modes very well. You know, he plays that role brilliantly. The big disappointment for me is that if you just take a moment, hang on, I'm just going to grab. This is my favorite album of all time, Forever Changes by Love. I'm sure a lot of people will know this. So this guy here is called Arthur Lee, and he was my childhood hero. I mean, I thought Love with it just did everything for me. Like it didn't get any better. When I interviewed Arthur Lee, it was in the Travel Tavern next to Heathrow Airport. He hadn't been to bed. We did the interview at 12 o'clock midday. He came downstairs. He hadn't been to bed at all, clearly on various drugs. And I started asking questions about, you know, I remember saying something like, you know, that album, you know, who influenced it? You know, what were you listening to? Something fairly innocuous. And he just said, are you accusing me of stealing other people's music? And I thought, oh, this isn't going to go well. It kind of went downhill from there. So that was making my absolute hero. And it was really scary. I mean, he was scary. He was really, really scary. He just got out of jail, actually, for trying to shoot his neighbour, which obviously didn't do.
How about some, as Victoria asked for at the beginning, some stuff that's coming up, Will, that you've been finding out about? Are people working in lockdown? Do you think there's going to be an explosion of stuff when people come out? What good music is being made right now, do you think? What could you recommend to us?
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's actually a very, very interesting question. What's happening is that people are navigating ways of dealing with this. And one of the things is that artists, when you're successful, they work really, really hard. They have to. So they're on a continual cycle of album, promotion, tour. That cycle has been broken for the first time in my career. And suddenly they're all sitting at home. And as a result, I think what we're going to see is a lot more consideration for the album. The album, you know, the argument recently has been the album is dead. It's all about streaming, it's all about tracks, it's all about playlists. I don't think that's true. I'll give you an example. I mean, this was, you know, Dua Lipa, the pop star, you know, she's a very, very mainstream pop star. Her album came out just when the lockdown started. The only reason it came out, it was going to be delayed. The reason it came out is it got leaked. In other words, you know, somebody put it online. So they had no choice. It's done incredibly well because everyone else is trying to move their albums back. And there's this period where you know, people want new music and they want things to go on. And so, you know, her album's done brilliantly. And as an album, and that's a pop star who normally would only do well on tracks. So that's been interesting. There's been, there's an amazing album that's just come out by a woman called Fiona Apple, who was big in the 90s. She's done this incredible album. And I think we're going to see a lot of more reflective music, more experimental. I think there's going to be a lot more meandering. There's going to be a lot less emphasis on trying to get that perfect hit, because a lot of people have been releasing stuff anyway, you know, and some of it has been gaining traction, you know, just like half-finished songs almost. So I think there's going to be a lot of throwing things out there, trying different material, almost like a kind of willful amateurism.
Almost like
that's what we're going to do.
Almost like 1972. It's going
Well,
to
that would be lovely. I don't know if we're ever going to see the likes of Mark Bolan again, but you know, I think there's going to be some good stuff.
Well, Will, thanks so much. We'll come back in a minute with some questions. We're just going to go to have a quick chat with poet Claire Pollard, but can you unmute everyone and give Will a quick round of applause? And thanks so much for coming along.
Sure, thank you very much.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Will.
Don't go away, folks. Don't go away, bruv. We're just going to talk to Claire. Claire, are you there? Where's Claire?
Got Claire?
Claire
Have you gone,
Pollard.
Claire?
Calling Claire.
She's vanished. Let's Mark hasn't vanished though.
Okay, let's look out for Claire. Bring her back in a minute. Mark.
Claire's there, but she needs to unmute. Oh, she's unmuted.
Sorry. I've unmuted myself now, sorry.
Oh, you unmuted yourself, yeah.
I thought you had to unmute me.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay, Claire, don't worry. I mean, everyone gets a bit confused with the Zoom meeting. It's really nothing to worry about at all.
I know. Poets and Zoom, eh?
Now, what have you got for us? Everyone, Victoria and I met Claire Pollard a long time ago when Victoria used to run a festival in Clerkenwell. And Claire came to help out. And then we gradually found out, you know, she's not only a sort of brilliant laugh to have around and a great person. She works at the Idol a bit, but she's an absolutely brilliant poet. She published her first collection, Bedtime, when she was 18, I think, for Blood Axe. And has published loads of poems with them and plays and other writings and teaches, and has also created our How to Write a Poem online course, which Victoria mentioned at the beginning. So a woman extremely well qualified to talk about poetry, being a poet, and being extremely affable, learned, and very intelligent. So Claire, what have you got for us now? What do you want to talk about now? I think you were going to talk about Milos, the Polish poet. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm just going to read a poem in a second. But yeah, just to say, I think, you know, a lot of us perhaps live our lives. We read novels and we think more novelistically, and we're always looking for the next plot development in our lives, and you know, the date, the wedding, the promotion, and so on. But actually, in these times, you can't think of your life like that. Nobody knows what's happening next. And I think poetry is really good for this moment, because it's about living in the moment. It's the kind of technology for paying attention, and whether that's kind of the traditional lyric poem, like Ode to a Nightingale, Keats, or so on, or it's the haiku, and we've got some haiku in this. I'm poetry editor for the Idol, and we've got some haiku in this new issue as well, by Yusuke Inui. Either way, it's about kind of paying attention to the moment, to the detail, to the blossom on the tree, to the song of a bird. So I think, yeah, we could all do with a bit more poetry in our lives at the moment, perhaps. And it's something you can just write if you've just got 5 minutes. You know, you don't need anything. You can just sit at your table, look around you, and write a few words. Try and make them as perfect as possible. It's a bit like a puzzle, poetry, I always think. You know.
Do you think most poetry should probably be kept private though?
No.
Yours definitely.
Mine should definitely.
No, I love hearing people's poetry. I'm very nosy. So I like hearing about their intimate thoughts, you know, and the way they see the world.
So who's Milos, and what's the poem you wanted to read?
I just was looking for a poem to read. Victoria suggested I read one, and I'm editor of Modern Poetry and Translation, which was set up over 50 years ago by Ted Hughes. Oh, yeah, and I love reading poetry and translation, international poetry. Yeah, this was one of the poets. Yeah, so this is one of the poets first published by Ted Hughes over 50 years ago. And it just struck me, this poem. It's about being out in nature, and a lot of us, that's our one pleasure at the moment. It's going for a walk, seeing something. It's actually about seeing a hare, and I've seen a few of my friends Instagramming pictures of hares the last couple of weeks. But it's also kind of about memory and about loss, and I thought it was really beautiful. So I'll just read this short poem by the Polish poet Milos. It's translated by him with Lillian Bally. Encounter. We were riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn. A red wing rose in the darkness, and suddenly a hare ran across the road. One of us pointed to it with his hand. That was long ago. Today, neither of them is alive. Not the hare, nor the man who made the gesture. Oh, my love, where are they? Where are they going? The flash of a hand, streak of movement, rustle of pebbles. I ask, not out of sorrow, but in wonder.
Thank you, Claire. Well, that's brought us right back into the present moment, I think, quite effectively. Well, should we move on to Mark? So everyone just say hello to Claire and check out her work. She mentioned Modern Poetry and Translation. It's a really lovely magazine, which sort of does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
It's like it's all foreign poetry, isn't it? That's translated. So it really, it's really, you know, it's wonderfully non-parochial, I suppose is the word. And when you read it, you feel truly, you know, truly a citizen of the cosmos, truly cosmopolitan. Does it come out 3 or 4 times a year, I think?
3 times a year, Tom.
3 times
Thank
a
you.
year. Now, Mark, let's just have a couple of words about poetry, and then we'll come back to Will for some questions until about 7.
So the thought that I had, I think this is the thought that the Romantics made, you know, and particularly, of course, Wordsworth and so on, they're very well known for their nature poetry. And I think one of the things that they were driving at and educating us in almost was to think about the difference between emotion and feeling. And I thought that when Claire was just reading the poem then, that, you know, if you look at something like the hair, or you feel the wind, or you look at the moon, you know, the moon is just past full this evening, or you look at Venus, which will be setting just behind the sun this evening. The first thing perhaps is emotion, you know, like, can I see it? It's cold, all that kind of hubbub. But as you settle into it, and I think it's often what poetry can draw out, you sense underneath there's a kind of deeper feeling, and it's steadier, and it's not moving around actually, you know. So a romantic poet like Coleridge will look at the moon and feel melancholy, or they'll feel the wind and actually sense something of the spirit of life moving through the countryside. So one of the reasons why I like poetry is it, you know, it almost like helps me to pay attention to a deeper, stiller, felt sense of life, as opposed to the sort of emotional ups and downs. And maybe that's quite a useful thing in these times, particularly as things start to change again. You're muted, Tom.
I'm muted. Will probably muted me. As Claire said, you know, it's all, well, there are long narrative poems, or at least they used to be. But in a sense, poetry is kind of the opposite of Netflix. You know, you watch these sort of high energy, addictive, narrative driven dramas, which are always propelling you forward. You know, and it's like Big Brother. You know, you've got to watch the next one, the next one. It's like taking a drug. Never quite enough. And poetry is the complete opposite of that. It's completely enough in itself, and it brings you into the present moment. And doesn't take that long either. I mean, it's great to have a book of poetry by the bedside.
Yeah, although I think a really great poet could do both. I mean, Will, Claire, and I think all live in South London, and I live near where William Blake used to hang out a bit, close to where he saw the angels on Peckham Rye. And so I did read just the other day actually that someone said that whilst William Blake could write epic poems that take you days to read, like Jerusalem and so on, he could also probably turn out brilliant aphorisms for Twitter. You know, so maybe he could have done both. You know, he who binds to himself the joy, does the winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies, lives in eternity's sunrise. I imagine that's less than 142 characters.
He's a very tweetable poet indeed, Bill Blake. I agree with you there. But he might not have liked the way that his work was being exploited by a gang of Silicon Valley overlords in order to sell advertising and data. But that's another question. So, Will, let's come back to Will. And Victoria, would you like to sort of pass some questions on? Do you ever read poetry now? Is that a bit sort of beyond you?
Me?
Yeah.
I can't understand things like that.
I remember you saying, actually, I remember a really great comment you had about, because you were a massive comics fan as well in your teens. You had a like a sort of pirate's treasure chest, which is absolutely full of those old comics.
Got that chest.
And you said it's the most, people look down on comics, but it's the most sophisticated art form because it combines words and pictures. And actually, when you look at William Blake, you know, half of those are comics. There's words and pictures all mixed up together.
It's true. Comics are also very good if you struggle to concentrate on a lot of words altogether. You've got pictures to help you along the way.
Well, I've got a couple of questions up from the chat on the right here. Frederick Guarino, could you unmute yourself? You've got a question about festivals. You there, Frederick?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, all the way from Montreal?
All the way from Montreal, yes.
Bloody
Sunny
hell.
Montreal today,
Hey.
but the polar vortex is bringing snow tomorrow. So, you know, we're near the Arctic.
The
Will,
shifting
hi.
polar
Yeah.
vortex.
We are. Hi, Will. On the festival scene.
Hi, how are you?
Hi,
Yeah.
how are you? On the festival scene, what have you heard in regards to post-lockdown plans? Because here in Montreal, we're a big festival city, Jazz Fest and so forth. So we're always keen to know what other festivals are doing, particularly in the UK. What is Glastonbury preparing post-lockdown?
Okay, so what's going to happen? Personally, I would say it's very unlikely in Britain that there will be a festival this year. I don't think it's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is that 2020 is going to become 2021.
Right.
So Glastonbury was going to be Paul McCartney, Taylor Swift, can't remember who else. And I think if they can, they're going to move all those artists to 2021. Now that causes problems because there's a lot of artists who would be expecting to do Glastonbury and the big festivals next year, and they won't be able to. So in terms of the music touring world, I'd kind of forget about it for this year for any big concerts. But I think next year it's going to cause a big logjam because there's going to be everyone's moving their tours. Everyone is moving their tours to autumn. I think that's ambitious. I think really they should be moving their tours to March 2021, or and I think it's going to be a kind of, there's just going to be too much, and then you have, with big concerts, you have a lot of issues because there are only so many companies to provide the equipment,
That's right.
and the rigs and everything else.
Yep.
So I think festivals, I mean, a lot of festivals will probably, and this is really sad to say this, I hate to say this, but I think a lot of festivals are going to collapse because they don't actually, people think they make huge amounts of money. They don't. It's so expensive. There's a thin margin. But that's not to say that they won't come back, and that they won't come back in interesting ways. So I think just like the musicians are going to be trying to do less commercial things, but they're still going to want to be creative. I think anyone who puts on a festival would be crazy to do it for the money. They do it because they love festivals and they love music and they love the idea of coming together. So I think we'll see some interesting things maybe in 2022. It might take that long, but I think it's going to be really interesting. But it's really hard, and this is my world, so I'm really sad about it. I'm very sad about Glastonbury. I was very sad about South by Southwest not happening, but I think it's going to come back in interesting ways, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Frederick. Then we've got a question from Tracy as well, Tracy Fordham, which is a bit more on, Tracy, are you there? Do you want to unmute yourself? I don't know whether Will's already answered some of the question, but you want to talk about music and lockdown, I think.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm an absolute bookworm, and I've just found it very interesting how the lockdown has, instead of sort of absorbing myself into all the millions of books that I still have left to read, I've actually been sort of really sort of looking at taking a lot of enjoyment from all of the creative sort of arts and the things that have been offered online, so ballet and some of the popular artists. Gary Barlow has been doing some really great duets online, and I've also been listening to classical music, and I've bought Sandy Burnett's course as well, which I'm looking forward to listening to. But I just wondered what music you would recommend for us in this really odd period.
I would recommend, I'd recommend this. This is a collection of Japanese ambient music. I know it sounds pretty obscure, but it's absolutely beautiful. It was designed as music written from the 70s, 80s and 90s. And it was designed to accompany actually in Japan to accompany buildings. So a certain building would have a certain mood, and you know, so like this building here, you know, civic building, civic spaces, and the architects would commission musicians to come up with certain sounds. It's incredibly calming. It's really, really beautiful, but it's not boring, you know, because often calming music can be extremely boring at the same time. So I think that is fantastic. And then on the other side, I'd recommend Ace of Spades by Motorhead.
Okay, that's quite a sharp contrast.
You gotta have a bit of Ace of Spades to remember, you know, that is, well, I'll let me do the talking, but I think there's a lot of wisdom in that song, alongside Highway to Hell by AC/DC, which I kind of feel is saying a lot right now.
I agree with, you know, Will, that really reminds me of going to the Big Chill Festival many years ago. You know, the Big Chill Festival, some of you might have been to it. It's a terrific ambient music festival.
We went with
techno and stuff. You know. And it's really nice. You get there, think this is amazing. And I did a talk and I was like having a really nice time and everything. And then by the end of it, absolutely fed up with this, you know. And I got in the car, all I wanted to do was to play Motorhead.
Or
AC/DC. You did a bit of both. Have we got some more questions, Vic?
Just one, unless anybody else wants to sort of shout out. One is from Paul, who is a motorbike expert. Will, what are those bikes behind you? There's a picture of bikes behind you somewhere, Will?
These are my friends Austin and Lois. They travel around the world on motorbikes. That's Lois here. Lois went all through Africa by herself on a motorbike. She went all through Iran and the Middle East by herself. She went all through South America, and she's written books about it. And Austin, who's her husband, he does a thing called the Adventure Travel Film Festival. So I couldn't tell you what those bikes are, but these people live for motorbikes. That is their entire life, and I really admire that. I really admire them because they've just got such a joie de vivre, and you know, they didn't have much money or anything. They just do it. They also had coronavirus. They got it very early on. They got it in. They were motorbiking in Spain, and they got it in, I think, February. So I've been having quite a few conversations because they had it quite badly too. But you know, if another life, I mean, I'm not a motorbike person, you know, but I really admire them because they just have such freedom. You know, they travel around the world and they ride whatever those bikes are. So I'm going to put them up close because somebody will know.
Somebody will know what they are.
But I have no idea.
Get out on the highway looking for adventure. Yeah, man.
Paul knows. He's sent it to the chat on the right. They're both on Honda CR250Ls. So there you go.
Right.
Well, someone just asked about your views on Kraftwerk. I think one of the Kraftwerk founders just died, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Florian Schneider just died. I absolutely love Kraftwerk. I went to see them at the Tate a few years ago. They played the whole of Autobahn, which is my favorite Kraftwerk album, and you wouldn't think that 4 middle-aged men standing behind tiny little iPads and doing absolutely nothing could be one of the most mind-blowing experiences of your life. But it really was. It was absolutely brilliant. I think Kraftwerk were the future before the future. You know, they were absolute pioneers. You know, and I don't know a great deal about the intricacies of electronic music, but what I think Kraftwerk did so well is that they took electronic music and they made it so warm. You know, people think of them as cold, but I don't think those songs are cold. I think they're really warm and they're really incredibly human, you know, and so, and a lot of humor there as well. So yeah, I love Kraftwerk. I absolutely love them.
Also, someone's just asked, should I just read the question out? Would you like to ask?
There's just one more question before that you can't see, Tom, from Mark. Mark, would you unmute yourself? It's a question, it's quite interesting. Is there a relationship between, yeah, there you go. Will you explain what you mean, Mark? Hi.
Thanks, Victoria. Hi, Will. We were reflecting earlier on the poetry and versus the kind of rock thing, and you said it was very different. But I wonder if you look back at Zeppelin and Rush, for example, and you see the words and the poetry there. Do you think there's a relationship between those kind of deeper and early, they were like progressive rock guys and changing the face of things versus the kind of poetry of people like Blake?
I think it's a really good question. I would say that I remember, I love Roxy Music, and I remember listening to Roxy Music's For Your Pleasure. It's such a great album, and thinking these lyrics are amazing. And then I read them. I thought, these are rubbish, but they weren't. It's just that they work so well with the music. So I think it's a slightly different thing. If you get someone like, I don't know, well, Leonard Cohen. I mean, you could read Leonard Cohen's lyrics separately, and they're just absolutely stunning. It depends on the music, I think, but with a lot of bands, the lyrics are fantastic with the music. They're rhythmic, they're designed to go with the music, and it creates a different feeling. Sometimes I've even felt that with Bob Dylan. I mean, I think that the way he conveyed a lot of the songs, the way he, especially in the kind of, late 60s electric period or mid 60s, they just sound absolutely fantastic. But then sometimes you read the lyrics, you think he's kind of making it up as he goes along. I mean, sometimes I think he got away with murder, and I love Bob Dylan, but you know what I mean? It's like, it probably wouldn't stand up to William Blake scrutiny in terms of true meaning, but it sounds good.
Yeah. Do you think there's a difference?
So yeah, I think there's a difference. I think there's a difference
between that and the music and popular music today, because it strikes me there was a depth that was available then that we don't see today, and maybe we're looking. I certainly am hoping that more will come.
There is depth. It's just that it's like so much. I mean, I think it's worth remembering that there's a lot of nonsense in the 60s and 70s and 80s, 90s. I think what's happened now is that there's so much, and all the pop stuff hits you in the face and then it goes away. But out of all this stuff, there'll be things that last. I mentioned that Fiona Apple album. I mean, the lyrics on there are really, really brilliant. I would suggest to anyone, listen to that album or listen to the lyrics on that. I think they stand up to scrutiny, to Joni Mitchell, or, I think Kate Bush was an amazing lyricist, people like that. It completely stands up. So it's there. Humanity is, people are creative, aren't they? But there's always so much commercial stuff and so much pop. There's good lyrics in pop, but then there's a lot of stuff which is just designed to, be a good tune, and the lyric doesn't really matter. Especially in dance music, a lot of dance music, the lyrics are often an afterthought, but I'm sure there is good lyrics in there.
Brilliant. Thank you.
I used to like that dance music song. Where there's no limits. That's a good piece of poetry.
Well, obviously you're talking about one of the classics there, Tom.
Yeah.
You are limited.
We just come up to our 7 o'clock, haven't we, Vic?
We have, I'm afraid. So there were a couple more questions, but one last question for both of you was from Amanda, which was that we may be talking about the comfort decade now. What was both of yours, Tom and Will's, what would you call your comfort song as you were growing up, maybe, or forever?
I can tell you what. I'll tell you what mine was. It was when I was a kid. It was on Tears from the Firecat by Cat Stevens. It was probably a song like Moonshadow. I think Moonshadow. That was very much when I was a kid. I remember thinking this is just a lovely song, and it's quite kind of cartoonish. There's something quite childlike about it. So that's mine. How about yours, Tom?
Well, actually, I'd agree with that. And it's one of the good things that our dad did was that he was really into Cat Stevens. And we had those records lying around. Again, I used to stare at the cover a lot. And he also got us into Roxy music, didn't he? I mean, he loved Roxy music. And
that's where I first heard it.
Yeah, one of my favourite songs, which I'll always come back to. I mean, I'm #1 Beatles fan, but sometimes I just had enough, and I can't think of anything I want to play at all. But I'll always come back to Mother of Pearl by Roxy Music. I don't know why. I think it reminds me of my dad sort of dancing around going, Mother of Pearl, I wouldn't trade you for another girl. And he used to come up to us and sing that in our faces. And I thought that was quite funny. And it is such a beautiful song. And as you say, like, that whole album, that is on For Your Pleasure, isn't it? Or is it on Stranded?
That's on Stranded, but it's absolutely amazing. That's a great record.
Stranded, yeah. It's just those two albums, Roxy Music, are absolutely amazing. We'll always come back to them. I don't know whether it's comforting or not. And my only other album I would definitely come back to. I was thinking the other day was, you know, you mentioned your Japanese ambient music, but Chill Out by the KLF. You know, that was a really amazing album. And unfortunately, they sort of deleted it. But I could listen to that again and again. I don't know how they did that. It just came out of nowhere. It's absolutely amazing. No drum beats in it at all. Totally ambient. And really beautiful with sheet barring. And you know, again, very, very original, but totally unpretentious. Now, Will, someone suggested that you might be able to play a song for us or play us out with a... Have you got your record player near you? Or have you got any access to a sort of musical box you could put on?
My record player's next door. It might be a little bit awkward to bring it out.
I think that's a bit late.
It might be a bit difficult. I could try, but I think it might be a bit chaotic when I sort of stumble through there.
Okay, well let's not worry about it. What song would you play yourself out with if you were a boxer at this point?
Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who.
Okay, man, that sounds really cool. I don't think I actually know that.
Yeah, you know Won't Get Fooled Again.
Yeah.
It's got a big scream at the end.
Well,
okay.
One person said, could you bring out your guitar and can I bring out my ukulele? But
do you really want me to do that?
It's really not a good idea. Not only, I mean, you know, not only are we...
you know, people beg us to stop.
Room clearer.
Luckily for everybody, it is time to end. So can everybody unmute yourselves? And we can have a big clap for Claire, Mark, Tom and Will. So much, Will. Thanks, Mark. Claire, thank you for that amazing poetry. I'm going to go and look up Mollusk. Now, everybody, the speakers are going to leave, but I am going to leave the meeting open. So if you've got friends, you can carry on chatting on the text, or mute yourselves, unmute yourselves, stay in, catch up with each other, say hi, meet each other.
I'm going to go because I'm going to have supper.
Bye-bye, Will. Bye-bye, Mark. Bye-bye, Tom.
Thanks so much for coming.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Victoria. Bye.
Lovely to see you. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, and I should tell you, we've got Sally Phillips and Jane Bussman next week. Audience. So it's going to be very exciting.
And could I just announce...
Thanks, Kev.
Oh, nice mug. That's Kevin and Julia, isn't it? Hi.
Yeah.
In Seattle. And I just got off the phone earlier today with Armando Iannucci, and he's going to do. He's going to be in the room the week after next, I think, with Peter Fincham, and they're going to be talking about what makes comedy great. There's a piece by Peter Fincham on the Idler website today. So that should be really good as well. So next week it's Sally Phillips, isn't it, Vic? And then
Sally Phillips.
Right, so the following week is Armando Iannucci.
Tremendous. Sally Phillips.
Armando Iannucci's very.
She is. Oh, you're tremendous.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, you're tremendous.
Thanks, Vix.
Bye. Well done. Lovely to hear you all.
Arrivederci. Hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista.
Power to the people.
Keep it real, man. Never mind the bollocks.
How do I turn it off?
Turn it off. Fine.
I love it though. Right.
I've got to go and change my string vest.
I love the string vest again.
All right, we've seen enough of that. Don't get any closer to the camera, please.
Get them off.
Ciao.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Edwy.
Good to see you.